Thank you, Smriti. Thank you, gentlemen. Now, the India Cloud Summit 21 is presented by Oracle and Airtel Business, co-presented by Dell Technologies and VMware. And we're joined by our gold partners, Cisco Meraki, McAfee Inspira, MongoDB, InfraBeat, Google Cloud, Veeam, and F5. Now, you can learn more about how their innovations can change your enterprise paradigm by visiting our virtual stalls through the summit. You can fill in the feedback forms, and there are some giveaways as well. So take a moment and click along there. And right now, at this point of time, we are midway through the second day of the summit. We have Sarbjeet Johal, Principal Advisor of the Batchery, in conversation with Rahul, Neel, co-founder and editor at Greyhead Media, on the present and future of cloud consumption. Let's listen in. Over to you, Rahul.
Hey, thank you, Ashwin. Thanks once again. Welcome, friends. I hope you have enjoyed the day so far. It's been a fairly packed day. Here we are with yet another interesting session on the present and future of cloud consumption. I will introduce our guest and expert in a short while. Just to give you a slight background on the topic, today, any strategic business initiative begins with a purpose. And the same is true for an enterprise cloud journey as well. The most fundamental element here would be to know the key objectives behind moving to the cloud. This could be a business-driven transformation. For example, a company wants to move towards a new business model, like offering a subscription-based model, or extending the geographical reach, or even to bring agility and faster time to market. It could also be a technology-driven decision. For example, an organization decides to move out of a data center or retire end-of-life equipment, end-of-support infrastructure. In both the cases, cloud comes in handy and cloud comes in play. As we understand the motive for moving to cloud and associated constraints, we could structure the priorities and define a roadmap. For example, when you see priorities of your organization is to exit out of a data center, you would choose lift and shift migration approach against modernization or a native build. Being driven by the purpose helps in defining the qualifying criteria and also defines migration strategies, looking at multiple business, technology, and economic factors. In the same light, it is important to understand how the cloud has changed its identity from a purely cost-driven initiative to a more core and must element for digital transformation. The earlier years of cloud were absolutely focused around cost. Customers were not very savvy or keen to discuss things like high availability, auto scaling, and any advanced features of cloud, including AI in the cloud, IoT, or IoT in the cloud. Cloud began more as a shared infrastructure model to deliver application and storage services, whereas the future conversations are pivoting around Industry 4.0, edge, agility, and business innovations. And going further forward, it will be around how we use cloud-based services to build more of AI, IoT-based futuristic solutions. So I can go on and on, but that's not the purpose of the session. To discuss all of this and more, I have a great friend, a cloud expert, Sarbjeet Johal, founding investor and principal advisor, the Batchery. Sarbjeet is based in the Bay Area, and he has previously worked as a senior director, cloud architecture at Oracle, and also as a senior technology strategist and cloud evangelist at Rackspace. Welcome, Sarbjeet. Welcome to the DynamicCIO India Cloud Summit Edition 2.
Thanks, Rahul. Great to be here with you.
Thank you. Similarly. So let's begin our conversation. The first point that I wanted to discuss was about the cost of cloud adoption. I mean, talking and bursting the myth that cloud is a viable option only in the beginning or when used as a platform as a service, but becomes costlier as the consumption grows. That's where we would like to talk about your the theory that you are working on, the theory of cloud consumption, and also the concept of how organizations can attain economies of scale by adopting cloud.
Yeah, that's a pretty loaded question right there when we talk about cost and the business at the same time. It, in my view, the cloud, if you are going to the cloud to start with for the cost benefits, and with that is a fine print, as an established company, if you are going to the cloud for the cost benefit, you will be disappointed. You will not save money in the beginning. There's a decent amount of chunk you have to spend to do the analysis of the current workloads before you move those. And once you move those there, you have to re-platform, refactor those applications to really get the benefit of the cloud. So there's a lot of costs associated with it. But why will you incur that cost? That is the main question. Why will you move to the cloud if that extra cost is there? I think the main reason is agility. Just imagine that you are in a race, and your competitor is running at 120 miles an hour, and you are going at 80. There's no way you can win that race. So cloud is all about agility, and what that agility gives you in the long term is the benefit of launching new businesses, going into different markets, and or creating new business models, right? So by doing that, your TCO, if you will, against your business, you will earn from it, right? It lowers it in the long term. In the short term, it's expensive proposition. In the long term, it is a cheaper way to go, I believe. Because if you are making a lot more money, like let's say 200% more money, and you're spending 50% more, you shouldn't be sad about it. It's like people avoiding taxes and they like, and then not earning more money. I have to pay taxes. It's a similar kind of situation.
Interesting. It's an established fact that cloud gives agility. However, when you are saying that in a short term, and how you very well explained that how cloud with a shorter vision can be an expensive proposition, because you have to do a lot of repurposing to begin with, but in the long the TCO is lower in the long term. How do you see the industry's adoption patterns, be it a large enterprise or especially the large enterprises which has a lot of technology debt? How do they plan to move to cloud? Because for them it is not quite easy to take the decision.
Yeah, I have, by the way, just to set some context, I have done quite a few cloud migrations myself. I've led those at Rackspace. I have done a lot of data center migrations at EMC and VMware. After doing a lot of data center audits, we were doing the data center consolidations at EMC and VMware, and those audits covered more than 1 million servers, virtual and physical put together, more than 1 million of those. And I have sort of a lot of patterns. I've seen those a lot of patterns, if you will, so that your viewers understand that where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And sometimes the context can get lost. I'm not an SMB guy. I'm not small and medium business guy from my history of my work. So I usually talk about the Fortune 1000 sort of domain. I'll stay in that.
Yeah, sure.
We can go to the lower end if we need to, and I can give my 2 cents there too. So when companies want to move to the cloud, in the beginning, okay, let me tell you what we have learned, the lessons we have learned. Early, like 10 years back, when I started, and 10, 11 years back, and the cloud was relatively newer, not very new, but relatively newer. It was like 4 or 5 years old, right? It was still not well sort of understood by most of the enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
People will just say, okay, let's move the like low hanging fruit, like whatever we can easily move. Let's move that there, right? So and then they will not do the due diligence to do the application application portfolio analysis on their total workloads, right? And they will try to measure the ROI and TCO as they were measuring on-prem. And there's, of course, comparisons are totally different, right? So here you have land or data center you have built on top of that. If you haven't built it, you're leasing it. There's all like power cooling, all that stuff, right? So putting cost on that is very hard, right? So all in all, the knowing that how much you're spending right now was hard for them.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's still hard. But what we have learned is over the years is that there is a sort of method to this madness, if you will. So you have to do the portfolio analysis of your full workloads and then identify some workloads which are meaningful to move, and don't do the big bang approach. That is the recommendation, one of the recommendations. And why you don't want to do the big bang approach is because your organization has to learn how to, even if you can move that stuff easily, let's say, how to log a ticket, who will fix what, who is responsible for what. Are you responsible for the operating system level sort of construct, or is it the cloud provider? So there's a RACI matrix, if you will, right? Like who is responsible, who needs to be uninformed about some incident, like what happens. So all the support structure has to be figured out, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 support, right? To learn that, you want to pick fewer workloads, and so you can ease into it. And then most of the migrations, successful migrations, I will say, they go in phases. They can go up to 4 to 6 phases, like many phases, depending upon if you have like 100,000 servers, it looks different than if you have just, let's say 2,000 servers. But you have to do that in stages. So some companies do the sort of like mid-tier applications up front. So it's like not very small applications, but at the same time, it's not their systems of record like ERPs and all that. I can go through the examples from the past, but that would be meaningless, sort of like to talk about. But in today's world, we are moving ERPs to the cloud. We are moving mission critical applications to cloud, and in earlier stages, there were objections to the cloud. The main objection to the cloud was like it's less secure, or it's not under our control, and all that stuff. And after the CIA started using the cloud, right, GovCloud at AWS, they started that first. The GovCloud sort of separate data centers dedicated to them. That fear was alleviated. Now, for last about 5 years or so, we can easily, with a lot of peace of mind, can say that cloud is more secure than your own data center, mainly due to the sort of best practices adopted by the cloud service providers, as well as the top talent they can hire. And it's their reputation at stake. If something goes wrong, they will lose a lot of business. So I'll stop there. I can go on and on sometimes.
Absolutely right. But emerging from this is something which is, to me, it is slightly out of syllabus. However, as you said, the mid-tier applications can be moved upfront, which are not the systems of records. And however, at the same time, even many organizations are even moving the mission-critical applications. Now, is the definition of mission-critical not undergoing a change? Because, earlier, the monolithic applications like ERP were called mission critical. They still continue to be mission critical. However, a lot of customer facing applications are becoming mission critical as well, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. Especially through the pandemic, we have learned that, like the customer interfacing applications were most mission critical. If you don't have the digital interface with your customers and or suppliers and or employees, even now this time, because employees were at home, you couldn't do much, right? So that the systems of engagement, what we call that bucket, those became very important. In my view, the system of okay, let's go step back a little bit.
Yeah.
So you asked about the theory of cloud consumption, which we sort of offline talked about briefly. I sort of developed this thinking or this theory of cloud consumption, what I call it, in the absence, in a nutshell, in the absence of doing deep analysis on all your workloads or on your applications, my pattern recognition says from all the work I've done in the field and I'm doing still, is that most of the systems of record will go into SaaS. Most of the systems of engagement, we also, by the way, there's another name for that. That's systems of differentiation. You can call that, right? So those the middle tier of systems, what you are talking about, that will use a lot of infrastructure and a service and platform as a services of the cloud. And the third tier is the systems of innovation, the latest, bleeding edge, if you will. That is AI, ML, brain-machine interface, and so forth, right? Natural language processing and voice interfaces and whatnot, right? So that will use a lot of infrastructure as a service. So what I did was that I took the Gartner's application demarcation, which they divided application stacks into three tiers: systems of record, systems of engagement, and systems of innovation. I mapped it to the cloud, three types of cloud consumption models, like a SaaS, PaaS, and infrastructure as a service. So that's what it is. So yes, systems of engagement are very important. What's critical is changing all the time. I think to survive in the future, what's becoming critical is that you need to do a lot of data science on your data, which you already have as a business. If you're not doing that, you will not be able to survive for long. So that becomes in a way, it's mission critical to survive in the long run, right?
Absolutely. I think these three that you just described, the systems of records, the system of engagement or differentiation, and the systems of innovation. Now, for a while, if I talk about the systems of records, which you said that will go the SaaS way, so will it be appropriate to say that that will be the place where most enterprises and large enterprises for now will be using private cloud, or will they also be experimenting with public cloud and using this as a service?
No, actually, they some of them want to stay in their own data centers, and mainly because of the people sort of side of things, right? People don't want to lose their jobs, right? They are operating these systems, they are racking, stacking servers, and I have sat across like tens, if not hundreds, of CIOs and CTOs and CEOs sitting across them, and then having these meetings with them, and when we were pitching the cloud and all that stuff to them, and they have their team sometimes virtually participating, and sometimes some of them are there, like were there pre-pandemic, and you can look at their faces, and they are trying to defend that they can run VMware better than we can run VMware in cloud, for example, at AWS or Google Cloud and so forth, right? So mainly because of that, they want to run it locally. But having said that, we are moving systems of record to cloud, and many times the software providers which provided systems of record, that's SAP, that's Oracle, mainly these two, but there's a long tail of others who provide ERP systems and supply chain management systems and so forth. SCM, I will always put that under systems of records. So they normally do the managed hosting, or they call it managed cloud services. So Oracle has big practice of managed cloud. So does SAP. They Oracle has their own data centers where they host it. SAP takes it to Amazon. They have some arrangement with Google Cloud as well. So what I'm trying to say is that depending upon how complex your ERP systems were, let's assume ERP equal to systems of record. Let's assume for a
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
There can be others too around it in the periphery of it of ERP. So you, depending upon how many customizations are done and all that stuff, the flavor varies. If you have done a lot more customizations, for example, you have to move your systems kind of as is. It's like moving what you had on-prem just totally as is over there, right? So you have your own dedicated instances, your own network, everything like is yours. There's nothing shared. In cloud, actually, we usually talk about like different technically on the back end, like shared nothing model, shared hardware is shared, that's public cloud, and shared nothing means like dedicated stuff for one particular customer, for example. And there's a shared everything model as Salesforce does that. They share even the database at a level. There's a foreign key for customer, and then how they segregate the data. So they have shared nothing model in that case. And if company is small or it's a relatively newer, younger company and they are migrating, then they may do, they may share the hardware, but not the OS level and or the database levels, especially in the system of record level.
Yeah.
So the flavors vary, and then we're moving all the time. These things are kind of sliding scale in a way that we're getting better and better and better, and the older stuff is getting out, if you will, because there's a for these kind of systems especially there's a end of life.
Yeah.
Most of the systems have defined EOL and EOS, what we call end of life, end of support policies are in place for these kind of systems. But for other two tiers of the systems, those policies are not there, and many times we talk about that the lack of EOL EOS policies is a big problem for most of the industries.
So, it's going into a very interesting zone. So when you say that ERP vendors like SAP or Oracle, for example, if I talk about SAP Cloud Platform, which is now being evolved into a platform as a service. Initially, it was about SAP NetWeaver Cloud or SAP HANA Cloud portfolio. I mean, long ago. And similarly, we talk about the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure again. So, do you think that enterprises will be gravitating towards these kind of platforms in the future, and will have a greater benefit than hosting them in house?
I think it's I personally think it's not between in-house and or with these. I call them technology providers. I don't call them service providers. I call them technology providers. They want to turn into service providers, cloud service providers, but they're having a hard time. SAP and Oracle, right? Oracle is better in this case, but still, you get my point. So it's not the choice between on-prem and this managed hosting stuff, right? Or managed cloud. I think that everybody wants to get out of their data center, right? And for very sort of right reasons, mainly for agility, because systems of innovation is where the innovation happens most of the time, right? The new business models emerge from there, going into new markets. Speed is new scale, what we usually call it, right? So you have to run faster. You have to be snappy in your response to your partners, to your customers, to your employees. So they have to go to the cloud at the end of the day. So it's the choice between, should I go with SAP or Oracle, or should I host with AWS, right? And it's not managed at that point. Actually, by the way, they are getting into managed SAP and managed Oracle sort of stuff. Like that's what we call industry focus. That's for last 2 years or so, Google Cloud started this trend, and this year AWS. I just came from reinvent yesterday, last night. You must have seen my Twitter feed and all the stuff there. So they're focusing on industries, right? So they will be doing some managed cloud offerings for certain type of industries, for healthcare, for auto, and so forth, right? So to answer your question, I think these companies, this is what I suggest, that these companies should move to the public cloud mainly for the reason of the data proximity. Because when you're building the systems of engagement, or let's say when you're improving the systems of engagement, they're already in place, or you're building newer systems of innovation, you need the data from systems of record.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And the proximity of that data, like how close it is to the other data, matters a lot, because the latency matters, right? You don't want to have duplicate data here, terabytes of data here, or petabytes of data here and over there as well. So for that reason, that sometimes we call it like the data gravity, right? So you want all the stuff at one place, but at the same time, you have this fear of getting stuck with one cloud provider. So there's a lot of push and pull going on. For that reason, you must have heard us talking about multi-cloud for the last 18 months or so, a lot more than previously we talked about. So my suggestion to enterprises is to pick a primary cloud, put most of the stuff there, and have a secondary cloud where you have the relationship figured out with that second cloud provider, so that if and or when the need arises, you can go there. Number one. Number two is you can put some workloads which are very specific to that particular cloud provider, right? It can be for many reasons, right? It can be for data sovereignty reasons, because they have they have coverage in the area where you are.
Absolutely.
It can be cost benefits. It can be the specialty, because they specialize in data science versus the other guys, right? It can be like, oh, you're using open source here. This company is open source friendly than the other one. I will not mention the names. I will not piss off the cloud providers, because I work with many of them, and I talk about that. So people understand that which cloud provider is more open versus a little bit more closed, and or which cloud provider is a leader. We know that number one. Amazon is number one by far, and by numbers, I'm going into tangent here, but by numbers, I'm going to give you maximum amount of information in a small amount of time. Number two is Microsoft by numbers, but I think by capabilities and for developer productivity, I think Google is number two. Microsoft comes at number three, I believe. And there's a long tail like OCI and Salesforce is trying, and IBM says they have a cloud, but we know the reality.
Yeah, exactly. Now, as you yourself mentioned, I so wish that I had a little more time budgeted for this session. However, I'll come to a very key point that I discussed with you offline, and that is about the intrinsically connected concepts of, you only told me about these concepts. I am not the one who's saying this. The concepts of skill gravity and feature proximity. They do go hand in hand. And I would like you to discuss about how organizations get sort of locked in with one CSP for most of its features and functions, and what's the way out if there is any.
Yeah, most of our industry pundits you will hear talking about the data gravity, which I also mentioned earlier, that is gravity to data. Once you go somewhere, that all the data is there. You don't want to. There's egress charges to get the data out. By the way, there's a lot of fight going on, and Cloudflare started saying that AWS is charging you, 10x, what they should charge you for egress and all that stuff. But long story short, so it's hard to move the data, lots of data from one place to other, right? So, but everybody talks about data gravity, but I started looking at the cloud consumption By the way, I'm economics major, but I've been doing technology for the last 27 years, coding and all kind of stuff. I've built so many systems. So I always wear this economics hat. So I look at the consumption side of things. I call it consumption economics side of cloud, if you will. So from that point of view, I started looking at it from different angles because there are multiple variables, not only technical variables, if you will. Normally we talk about there's people, there's processes, and there's tech, right? So from the people side of things, I think that the skills gravity plays a huge role. So if you are, let's say, company A, let's say you're GM, right? Making cars and all this stuff, and you pick a cloud provider. And who was the first cloud provider? It was AWS. So you trained some people on that, and then the new people who join your company, what happens? They come work with the people who you already trained on AWS, and so they train them to do that stuff, and then that skills gravity keeps you there. Like, and also there's an inherent conflict between developers and operations at every company. Developers want to be on the cutting edge, or what they sell is their skills. Developers are people who just sell their skills. That's how it is, and they move jobs almost like every 18 months on average. I think it used to be 2 years. I think even less today. So they want to stay with the leader in tech. They are hungry for tech. They are know-how hungry people. So for that reason, that I came up with this the skills gravity, a sort of concept. Skills have gravity. So if you're using one cloud, you will be using that cloud for a long time to come. To defy that skills gravity, I tell the consumers of the cloud that you have to have very specific plans in place if you want to do multi-cloud. You have to train new people on cloud number 2. Let's say in this case Google Cloud or GCP or Azure, right? So you have to go through extra efforts. It's not going to happen on its own, right? So, and that's my advice to the consumers of the cloud. To the producers of the cloud, it's very simple advice that to outcompete your competition, you have to out-educate the market. So you have to really out-educate the market if you want to keep your market share, because skills have gravity. If you can train more people, and I have been singing this song for last almost 3 years now. I think Google and these guys are listening, and I just beat the drum around it for almost 3 years. And you hear the things like from AWS, they want to train, I think, 25 million or something.
Yeah, I know. I heard about that. 27 million people. Yeah.
Google announced the similar numbers. So they understand that through I think people like me and others telling them the same thing. Like, hey, if you want to have the grip on the market, you got to make sure people know your technology, how to use it, right? So that's the skills gravity. The other one is the feature proximity. So why will you pick provider A versus B? That is that in that context, that term I defined. People pick provider A versus B because provider A has a lot more features, right? Like they have plethora of features. The breadth is a lot more. Even if you go to provider B, you can save like a lot. Let's say 20% of money on your 30% of your workloads. You will pick. I suggest you pick provider A because they have the breadth of the capabilities, right? Features, right? So the proximity of feature from feature A or feature 1 to feature 2 in this case, it's right there. And that's why we normally, I cite the example from our real life. That's why we shop at Walmart or Target of the world, right? Or the big box stores. Like when we go there to get soap, we want toothbrush as well. We want, sandals or other things, right? Or clothes, right? So you want to go to one place and get everything from there. And in our world, it's even more complex because we have to write the contracts, usually MSAs and all that, master service agreements and whatnot, with a provider to get their services. And it all goes through legal department, and then you're negotiating the pricing. So if you have to do that with another provider for another thing, there's a lot of friction. So it gives you the frictionless access to more services if you go to, in this case, provider A. So I think the feature proximity is very important, and then Amazon is winning that war, like by big margins, because their breadth of features is a lot more than Google. Even though I love Google for their lightness and then ease of use and everything, but I think it's a feature proximity or flywheel effect, what we sometimes call it, which is keeping Amazon what Amazon is.
Great. It's exciting times, and plethora of choices. Consumers need to be very focused on the purpose. As I said in the beginning. So, in summary, we can say that Cloud Story began by influencing the IT operations or the CIO's office or the CTO's office. However, as the time passes, it has started driving a much stronger demand from business organizations to transform their products and services. And going forward, we shall expect this to grow stronger. Thank you very much, Sarbjeet, for your time, and excellent. I would say I would rate it a 5-star conversation. I wish I had more time, but thanks any which ways. Thank you so much.